a big message that I have for you tonight, and I think you're really going to enjoy it and appreciate it. And so I'm excited about the service this evening. We're going to start off with breaking news, though. Just like the last week we had breaking news, and this week we also have breaking news. So the breaking news this week, obviously, on Friday evening, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. Now, what was interesting to me as we came in the house, my wife was just going to show me something. She was going to show me that we actually have a certain channel, Fox News, on our television, and she turned it on, and it was just now breaking. So we caught it right at the time that it was breaking. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away, and this is a big deal. And I didn't know exactly why it was a big deal at the time. I mean, there's going to be a big deal politically, of course. That's going to be a huge thing. Our nation, I don't know if our nation could experience anything more. Right now, when we look at the political error that's going around in our nation right now, the tensions are so high. Could it possibly get any bigger? The tension get any rougher or heavier? And then this happens. So I think our nation has just been hit really hard by this. So this is a big thing as far as politicalness, okay? But is it big in other respects as well? And I think so. As I was watching that night, I noticed something very interesting. And it came up really quick that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was Jewish. And that plays a huge role in why this is a significant news event, prophetically, as well as what's going on around the world. As you know, Friday began, or at sunset on Friday began Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the New Year's, okay? It's a brand new year. For us, we change our calendar year on January 1st, but not so in the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar changes their year on the first day of the 7th month. They call it Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. It's also referred to as Yom Teruah, which means Day of Trumpets. And so it was a big thing. Now, she passed away on the New Year, the Jewish New Year. She passed away on Yom Teruah. So that was a huge thing that I think, I just knew it said something. But let's take a look a little bit more at just the idea of what it means to have a new year in Rosh Hashanah as this part of this new year. How many of you would like to have a new year, right? 2020 has been insane and crazy. You would love to just fast forward 3.5 months so that 2020 would be over and we can just move on with the rest of the life and everything. But we still have 3.5 months to go in 2020. But for the Jewish calendar, it began a brand new year. And what does the meaning of that? I'm not positive yet. I'm not sure. The year 5780 was the year of the mouth, and yet we were wearing masks. So what does year 5781 mean? Well, 80, again, it's going to continuation on the mouth, maybe a widening of the mouth, maybe something that has to do with teeth or whatever. It's going to have something to do with the face or the mouth. So I think that's a big thing that we'll be looking into as we continue on. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I had this article. This was on the Jerusalem Post, and I want to read to you a little bit about this article. It says, news of her death traveled quickly via social media and became a focal point in many New Year's services, religious leaders and observant Jews. So as it says there, the headline, Ginsburg's death on Rosh Hashanah, significant for some Jewish Americans. And so I knew that it's going to play a big role. What was it saying prophetically? So I continued to read this article, and there's a couple of things that it says here, but I want to read a couple of them for you. As it goes on, it says, just as many Jews in the United States were sitting down to a post-sunset Rosh Hashanah dinner on Friday, preparing to dip apples in honey to signal the sweetness of the new year comes, news came of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. So they were thinking something sweet, brand new year, and then all of a sudden, something bad news came. Okay, so they were thinking good news, bad news came. Ginsburg, the first female Jewish member of the United States Supreme Court, died on one of the holiest days in Judaism, as many of the country's nearly 6 million Jews welcomed the new year 5781, based on the Hebrew calendar. Now, as I went down a little bit further, this was coming from Stephen Breyer, who is also a Supreme Court justice. He's also Jewish. He said that, I heard of Ruth's death while I was reciting the Mourner's Kaddish at the Rosh Hashanah service. The Mourner's Kaddish just happened to be a prayer in memory of the dead. He's actually reciting this prayer, the Mourner's Kaddish, and that's when he hears of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. So the timing is, I think, is significant. Prophetically, not just in our country politically. We're talking prophetically now. And so it keeps going. Her death, this was coming from one of the rabbis, okay? Her death on the eve of Rosh Hashanah also has significance in Jewish tradition. Rabbis and friends said one of the themes of Rosh Hashanah suggests that very righteous people would die at the very end of the year because they were needed until the very end, said Rabbi Rick Jacobs, president of the Union for Reform Judaism. And he also stated those who die on the New Year holiday are considered tzaddik, which means a title given to the righteous and saintly. Now, it is not for us to judge her, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That's going to be up to God. She is in the hands of God at this time. So it's not up to us to judge on whether she was righteous or saintly, or in their tradition that God kept her all the way to the very end. It's like He kept her in the game all the way up to the very end because she was so needed. Okay. Now I don't know much about that, but I began to start reflecting on what could this possibly mean prophetically of her death, because I believe that timing is everything, and God's perfect with His timing. God is perfect with His timing, and so I think timing is everything. So what exactly does it mean to us? When I was sitting there asking that question this morning, as I'm driving to church this morning, and the image in my head, because so much has been said about how close a relationship, even though they were so separate, how close a relationship that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had with Anthony Scalia. Now, Anthony Scalia was on the opposite spectrum. He was a very, very conservative justice, and he died. And what's very interestingly enough, again, you got to look at this in the prophetic as well as the electoral or the election type of things. Okay, when Anthony Scalia passed away, that's when President Obama was the president at the time, and he wanted to replace Anthony Scalia, the most conservative person on that bench, and there was some conflict about his nomination and whether it would get confirmed or not. As you know, he nominated, but the person wasn't even voted upon. Now, the most liberal justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passes away, and we're right in that same situation. We are in the last year of a president's tenure, and you know that he's going to nominate, and whether or not the Senate's going to confirm, that's a whole nother story. But I'm just saying, it just seems like there's a parallel here. I just can't quite figure out yet, but there's something big here. But here's the situation. I just felt like I was going to see pictures, cartoons of Anthony Scalia welcoming Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You know, the cartoons of heaven, as people would pass away, they'd draw figures with angel wings and things like that. And that's all I could think of this morning as I'm driving. What does this mean? And then it dawned on me that the judge is standing before the judge. When we are looking at what this means, the judge is standing before the judge. And because of what the next 10 days represent, and I mentioned this last week, the 10 days of awe, these 10 holy days, these are days of repentance, days of making ourselves right with God, because the Day of Atonement is coming, where we stand before God, and the question is whether or not our name is in the book of life or not. And that's the big question. And so to me, I really feel like the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Rosh Hashanah, on the very first day of Yom Teruah, to me it represents judgment's coming, judgment's coming, judgment's coming. So I think as a Christian, as a church, as a nation, we need to get ourselves, make sure that we take the most advantage of these 10 days of awe, 10 days to repent, 10 days to get as close as we can to God, because it appears judgment's coming. I mean, I think it was a very, timing is everything. All right, well, let's take a look at what I want to talk about this evening. Is there were 3 times a year that Israel was required to come before God, to come before, all the males were to come before. It's Exodus chapter 34, verse 23. Now, this comes when Moses came down from Mount Sinai the second time. And as Moses comes down, Exodus 34. As Moses comes down Mount Sinai, he's instructed in these words. He says, you shall, 3 times a year, verse 23 says, 3 times a year shall all males appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. 3 times a year. And those 3 times a year are the 3 feasts. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Booths. Now, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is also very closely connected to Passover. Okay, we understand that. Passover, Good Friday, Jesus raised from the dead. But if you'll remember, this year during Passover, I don't know if it had happened before, but this year during Passover, Israel was on curfew. They were on lockdown, and they weren't able to celebrate Passover. And as I've been reading the Bible through this year, God has been laying on my heart to read this Bible through this year. And as I'm reading this Bible through, I came to that conclusion that God gave them an alternate date. If they couldn't celebrate the Passover, that God gave them an alternate date. And that alternate date was closely connected to the 20th day of the second month. The 20th day of the second month, 0220, that's the day that was significant for me. It was so powerful for me. But that day comes in Numbers chapter 10. But in Numbers chapter 9, we find out the reason why they stayed at Mount Sinai until the 20th day of the second month. They stayed at Mount Sinai until the 20th day of the second month is because they had to have Passover. But there were some people that came up to Moses and said, what if somebody's unclean because they came in contact with a dead body? Moses went and talked with God, and God says, you're absolutely right. If someone comes in contact with a dead body or are on a long journey, they can celebrate the feast of Passover on the 14th day of the second month. So we receive a second date. We receive an alternate date. So we also found out through my reading, we also found out that second Passover only occurred one time. And it's only recorded one time, which is amazing because the story of Hezekiah is recorded 3 times. It's recorded in Isaiah, it's recorded in Kings, and it's also recorded in Chronicles. But the story of Hezekiah celebrating the second Passover is only recorded in 2 Chronicles. It's 2 Chronicles chapter 30. And this week we do have the slides up, so I hope that you're taking notes with the slides. But this week, chapter 30, verse 2, it says, "For the king and the princes and all the assembly in Jerusalem had taken counsel to keep the Passover in the 2nd month." So Hezekiah fulfilled the coming of the second Passover. He fulfilled it. At least the part where, well, because uncleanness. People weren't pure and ready to take the Passover. So there still leaves Passover, second Passover, to be taken because someone's been on a long journey. I believe that long journey is Jesus, so that's for another day. But as we go on, we remember that they were in lockdown then. The second feast is the Feast of Weeks, which we understand as Pentecost. And the third feast is the Feast of Booths. Now, the Feast of Booths is really powerful. It's important, but it's part of the 7th month. The 7th month is so holy. And as you might recall, Israel is in lockdown during the Feast of Booths. So I think I slides up there, the Feast of Booths. They're in lockdown right now. Lockdown began at 2 p.m. on Friday in Jerusalem. Just hours before Rosh Hashanah, lockdown began. And it will last all the way till the last day, exactly 3 weeks. It'll last till the last day of the Feast of Booths. And when I read that it was going to last till the very last day of the Feast of Booths, I'm going to show you how powerful that really is in our message tonight. But think about this. Those 3 weeks, Israel is shutting down the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and the Feast of Booths. The 3 big days. Feast of Trumpets, 10 days later, Day of Atonement, and then starting on the 15th day of the 7th month, you have the Feast of Booths. Israel is in lockdown. All three of those events are shut down. And I told you, I really believe timing is everything. Why did they wait until just hours before the Feast of Trumpets to shut down? I know they had to sign all the Abraham's Accord and all that kind of stuff in Washington, but it just seems like there's something spiritual going on here when the Feast of Passover and unleavened bread is shut down during this coronavirus, and now these 3 feasts are shut down. And why that's important is because we all believe that Jesus fulfilled the Feast of Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread. He fulfilled the Feast of Weeks. Those were 2 of the feasts that were required of the males to go to Jerusalem. He fulfilled those 2. But most suggest that Jesus has not yet fulfilled trumpets, Feast of Day of Atonement, or the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles, and that he's going to. That's why there's so much prophetic talk going about these 3 days, these 3 feasts that take place these 3 weeks. I think it's a big deal. I think we can make an argument that there's something going on right now that in our world that's going crazy. All right, so they're in lockdown, and I had to ask myself a question. I was saying, you know what? There's no alternative. Remember, for Passover, I read through the Bible. There was an alternate date. But here, for trumpets, for Day of Atonement, for Feast of Booths, there's no alternate date. there's no, if you miss this because you're away on a long journey or because you're unclean, there's no additional day down the line where you can celebrate that. And then God showed me something. God showed me something, and I want to show it to you. It's found in 1 Kings chapter 12. The question is this an alternate date for the Feast of Booths? An alternate date. So 1 Kings chapter 12. Now in 1 Kings chapter 12, David has passed away and his successor, Solomon, has passed away. And so tradition has, you ready for this? Tradition has that the Day of Trumpets is the making of the kings. And they have that because, well, David, when he made Solomon king in his place, they blew the trumpets. So they would say that Feast of Trumpets is the day where they anoint the king. And so everybody was like, this is big. Maybe this is prophetic. Jesus comes as king on Feast of Trumpets. Well, that didn't happen. But let's take a look at what does happen in our scripture. Solomon passes away, and they want to make his son Rehoboam king. And so when are they going to make him king? They're going to make him king on Feast of Trumpets. And when they come together to make him king, something happens. You know, the people are like, your dad, he put really hard pressure on us, and this was not good. And so he tells them to go away and to come back. And when they go away and they come back, he's very harsh with them. And all of a sudden, we have a split of a nation. Some stay with Rehoboam, but 10 of the tribes go with Jeroboam. And we have now a split. We have Israel and we have Judah in Jerusalem. And so we see that story in 1 Kings chapter 12. But what happens is something I think is very powerful here, is Jeroboam didn't want the people to go back. He didn't want the people to go back to Jerusalem. And so he says, what am I going to do? Remember, because the Torah, the Bible, requires that they go 3 times. Feast of Passover, Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Booths. And so listen to what it says in verse 32 and 33. It says, and Jeroboam appointed a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast that was in Judah. And he offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did in Bethel, where he put one of the golden calves, sacrificing to the calves that he made. And he placed in Bethel the priest of the high priest that he had made. He went up to the altar that he had made in Bethel in the 15th day of the 8th month, in the month that he had devised from his own heart. And he instituted a feast for the people of Israel and went up to the altar to make offerings. Now, why I think this is important is because the alternate for the Feast of Booths is a man-made alternate. It's not a God-made alternate. If you go back to Numbers chapter 9, it was God's decision. God said, if people are unclean because they came in a touch of a dead body, or if they're away on a long journey, so it's God who adds the alternate. Then they can come and celebrate it on the 14th day of the 2nd month. But here, it's not God that gives the alternate date. Instead, it's human beings that give the alternate date. And why I thought that was significant is because they shut down on the very time where people were supposed to worship. And so what do you do when you shut it down when the people are supposed to worship? Well, maybe let's give them something alternate to do. Let's give them an alternate time frame or an alternate date. Well, Daniel, the book of Daniel will talk about this Antichrist or beast trying to change set times. Set times that he tries to change are these kind of set times. Passover, unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks, trumpets, atonement, and booths. And it just seems like all of a sudden the Feast of Booths, that becomes a possibility for a rise of the beast who might try and change any kind of dates or schedules. So just kind of keep that in mind, because there, biblically, divinely, there is no alternate. Humanly, there is an alternate, and that's found in 1 Kings chapter 12. So I wanted to share that with you. Now I want to get to my main topic today. It's Jesus and the Feast of Booths. Because I told you that Jesus, well, he fulfilled the Feast of Passover. He became our Passover lamb, our Paschal lamb. He fulfilled the Feast of Weeks, right, with the Holy Spirit. He ascended into heaven, and I talked about that last week. Jesus, remember, if Jesus says, I have to go, and then the Holy Spirit will come, does that mean the Holy Spirit has to go before Jesus can come again? That was the big question last week. So, Feast of Weeks was fulfilled. The big question now is the Feast of Booths. Now, there are two scriptures that I want to share with you. John chapter 7, but it's also 1 Kings chapter 18. Because these stories parallel. And I want y'all to catch that. I had never caught it before. I shared it with my wife this week, but it is huge. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal because there is a huge parallel that's going on in John chapter 4, or John chapter 7 and 1 Kings chapter 18. So those are the two slides, I think, at the very end. So my wife can go back and forth between those two slides, but it's 1 Kings chapter 18 and John chapter 7. So let me get both of those so I have them in my reach so I can turn to them at any time. If you'll do that as well, also make sure that you write these down. Write these scriptures down, because this will blow your mind, okay? So John chapter 7, it starts off with a very interesting thing. All right, so after this, look at verse 1 through, I'll just start reading at verse 1, okay? It says, after this, Jesus went into Galilee, and he would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. So his brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For not even his brothers believed in him. Verse 6 is so powerful, and I don't know if we've ever caught this because we don't think he's talking about booths. Jesus said to him, my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I'm not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come. After this, he remained in Galilee. Now, I'm going to pause right there, not the video. We're going to keep going live on the video. And by the way, I do have my tea. It is unsweet, just in case anybody wants to know. All right. And so kind of get the picture. Jesus just told his brothers who didn't believe in him that he's not going up to the Feast of Booths. But remember, the Feast of Booths is required for him to go. Why would Jesus say, I'm not going, when it's required for him to go? But then he says, my time has not yet come. It's not time. It's not time. Now, most of us say, well, he meant that his time was going to be at Passover. But he's not talking about Passover. He's talking about the Feast of Booths. And so it would indicate that there's a time coming when the Feast of Booths is going to play a significant role, where Jesus will make his appearance at a Feast of Booths. So that becomes, I think, a prophetic statement that Jesus has made there. Because why in the world would Jesus say, I'm not going up to the Feast of Booths? All right. Now, turn with me in your Bibles to 1 Kings 18. In 1 Kings 18, the skirt guy, Elijah, that my son Caleb talked about a little bit this morning, his favorite funny story in the Bible. Before that funny event, Elijah prayed that it wouldn't rain. And it did not rain for 3.5 years. Now, 3.5 years is a long time, but I'm going to show you that this is it's prophetic, and it's very powerful. All right. So after this time, look at 1 Kings 18, verse 1. After many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, "Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." So God's now ready to bring some rain. So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, and when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water. And Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the valleys. Perhaps we may find grass and save the horses and mules alive and not lose some of the animals." So they divided the land between them to pass through it. Ahab went in one direction by himself, and Obadiah went in another direction by himself. And as Obadiah was on the road, behold, Elijah met him. And Obadiah recognized him and fell on his face and said, "Is it you, my lord Elijah?" And he answered, "It is I. Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here." So go tell your Lord, Elijah is here. Now get this. This is huge, okay? And he answered him, said, "How have I sinned that you would give your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent to seek you." And when they would say he's not here, he would take an oath of the kingdom of nations so that they had not found you. And now you say, "Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And as soon as I have gone from you, the Spirit of the Lord will carry you, I do not know where. And so when I come and tell Ahab and he cannot find you, he will kill me. Although I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Has it not been told to my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water? And now you say, go tell your Lord, Elijah, behold, Elijah is here, and he will kill me. And Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will show myself to him today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. All right, so get this picture now. Elijah's been missing for 3.5 years. No one knows where he's at. They've been looking for him. They can't find him, but he just shows up. He just appears. So go back to 1 John, or John chapter 7. And we're going to keep reading our story here because it's getting ready to get very interesting. So verse 10 of John chapter 7. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, but not publicly, in private. So now Jesus is at the feast. Listen to this. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, where is he? And there was much muttering about him among the people. While some said he's a good man, others said no, he is leading the people astray. And yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him. So here's what's happening. Everybody's looking for Jesus. Just like in 1 Kings 18, everybody's looking for Elijah. Ahab is so mad. He has looked all over the place. He can't find him. And everybody's looking for Jesus. They can't find him. And then all of a sudden, verse 14, about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up in the temple and began teaching. So, bam, he just shows up. And in the middle of the feast. So So is that a prophetic phrase? Is Jesus going to show up in the middle of the Feast of Booths? I don't know. I'm just telling you what it says here. Now, verse 15 says, the Jews therefore marvel, saying, how is it that this man has learning when he's never studied? So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. And so now there becomes a battle between Jesus and the Pharisees, Jesus and the priests, and this is going to be very interesting because they're going to call Jesus demon possessed and all that kind of stuff, and so it's going to get a very little heated conversation going on in John chapter 7. Well, we also go back to 1 Kings 18, and we know that there's a battle going on. Let's take a look at that battle and the significance of it. So back to 1 Kings chapter 18. All right. So, in 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah meets Ahab, and it says, when Ahab saw Elijah, verse 17, Ahab said to him, is it you, you troubler of Israel? And he answered, I've not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now, therefore, send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So now Elijah has set up the battle. This is going to be a battle between him and all the other prophets, the false prophets, prophets of Baal and Asherah. And so you know the story. They both received two bulls, or one bull. And they're going to be able to offer their sacrifice, and whichever God answers with fire, that's going to be the God who's the real God. He's the real deal. So let's take a look at where this starts. Verse 25. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourself one bull and prepare it first. For you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice. No one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, for he is God. Either he is musing, or he's relieving himself, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. That's funny, right? That's a funny part of the story. Elijah is making fun of these guys. He's taunting them. He's teasing them. Verse 28, and says, they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved until the time of the offering of the oblation. The offering of the oblation is what caught my attention. Oblation literally means offering or sacrifice. So for them, it's really redundant. The offering of sacrifice. Most understand this as at the time of the evening sacrifice. But God showed me something here that's really powerful, and I'm going to share this with you. And at midday, at the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. And then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed, or about 3 gallons of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. And he said, now pay attention to this. He said, fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And then he said, do it again a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. Now, first of all, you have to ask yourself the question, why did he pour water on the altar? And most of the time, we would just assume that, oh, he's really just trying to demonstrate how powerful God is. You know, wet wood doesn't light. And so all of us will just accept that interpretation and say wet wood doesn't light. And so Elijah's trying to just show them just how powerful God is. God is not only going to send fire and burn up this offering, he's going to do it while this offering and this wood is all soaking wet. But you have to realize something, and this is something. Remember, Ahab sent Obadiah out looking for water. Why are they now sparing 12 jars full of water? What is the purpose of, you know, this is like an overkill, but it has more. It's more than just God is so powerful. Let's test his power by seeing if he can light wood on fire, a wet wood on fire. Okay, there's something more about that. All right, and so let's keep reading. All right, so it says, verse 36, at the time of the offering of the oblation. He did this at the time of the offering of the oblation. Most translation, at the evening sacrifice. I think it's something bigger. Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. As soon as he says this, I mean, what a simple prayer, right? But as soon as he says this, it says, then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust. But here's the part that most people don't even pay attention to. And it licked up the water that was in the trench. It's not so much about just burning wood that was wet. It licked up. It's like the fire sucked up the water. So much so that it appears that the water, the four jars of water that was poured 3 times, so 12 full jars of water, was actually part of the sacrifice. It was part of the offering that God just sucked up as part of that, or licked up as part of the offering. You know, when you go to a restaurant, nice restaurant, you have this nice meal, and then you get dessert, and that dessert is like this chocolate lava cake, and it has all that chocolate all over the plate and all that, and you sit there and you eat that cake, but then you make sure no one's looking, and you lick up the plate, lick up all the chocolate on the plate. How many you guys have done that, right? You've done it. It's like he licks up the last portion of the offering, and it wasn't the water that was on the wood. It was the water that was in the trenches. It licked it all up. And to me, it told me that the water was part of the offering. And that is huge, because as soon as that happened, guess what Elijah does? Elijah is going to pray for rain. He prays for rain. Remember, it hasn't rained for 3.5 years. There are 2 times for rain in Israel. There's the early rains, which we call the spring rain, and then there's the latter rain, and they call those the fall rain. So it rains in the spring and it rains in the fall. And why that's important is because he said it wasn't going to rain for 3.5 years. So when Elijah made this prophecy, he had to have said it either in the fall or he said it in the spring. So 1 whole year goes by and there's no rain. No spring rain, no fall rain. 2nd year goes by, there's no rain. No spring rain, no fall rain. Third year goes by, no rain in the spring or in the fall. Okay? And now another 6 months go by. So it's either the fall, the 7th month, or it's the spring, the 1st month. And he's praying for rain, right? And what does his servant say? His servant says, I don't see anything. So this is verse 44. And he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there's nothing. And he said, go again. 7 times he goes. And verse 44, at the 7th time he said, behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea. And he said, go say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go up, lest the rain stop you. And in a little while the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord went on Elijah. And Caleb prophesied this morning. Said this was going to be part of the message today. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. He gathered up his garment, pulled up his skirt, and he ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So that was a big thing that happened. All right? The water became part of the offering, and it was part of the prayer. Now turn back with me to John chapter 7. Because in John chapter 7, we get really crazy stuff. Starting with verse 37, I want y'all to hear this. On the last day of the feast, I told you that was big. Remember that the lockdown goes all the way till the last day of the Feast of Booths. On the last day of the feast, the great day. Wow, that last day, the great day, it's pretty important. What happens? Jesus stood up and he cried out, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the Scriptures has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. And now this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive. For as of yet the Spirit had not yet been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. You see, there was something that was pretty big that happened on the last day of the feast. It's literally the 8th day of the Feast of Booths, not the 7th day. They had an extra day for the Feast of Booths. It was the 8th day. And on that 8th day, they had a very important ceremony. You ready for this ceremony? It's called the water oblation. It's called the offering of the water. And on the last day of the feast, in order to pray for the fall rain, because Israel depended upon the rain. Unlike Egypt, where everything was irrigated, Israel relied on the rains of heaven to bring life to their land. And so on the last and greatest day of the feast, they had a ceremony called the water of oblation, the water offering. And the priest, they would make this huge parade, and they would go down to the pool of Siloam. And they would take up water out of the pool of Siloam, and they would march and parade all the way back up to the temple. And get this, they would pour the water on the altar on the last day of the Feast of Booths. Pretty crazy, huh? To me, it kind of indicates that 1 Kings 18 and John chapter 7, they mirror each other. They parallel each other. Jesus is something, there's something big happening there, which to me, it meant that we need to be praying. There's a big battle going on. We know there's a big political battle about to hit our country, bigger than we thought it could possibly be. It just got 10 times bigger last Friday. And the truth is, I don't think it's done getting bigger. I think something even bigger is going to happen before all this is said and done in the 44 more days left to go until the election day. So be praying for our nation for sure. But the political battles, the physical battles that are going on in our world, they pale in comparison to the spiritual battles that are happening. That most of us, we don't even see them right now. We don't realize that there's these spiritual battles going on. But Elijah, with him, it was a battle on Mount Carmel. Who's God? Who's God? And that's the question that all of us have got to ask this time. Who is God? Stop bouncing back and forth between two opinions. If Baal's God, then worship him. And if Yahweh is God, then worship him. And I think that's the choice that all of us need to make this time of year. These 10 days of awe, as we get to the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, which literally means tabernacling with God. That's pretty big. It's also referred to as the Feast of Ingathering, because it was the time where they had finished gathering all their harvest. If that doesn't sound like end time, rapture time, I don't know what is. But we have got to be ready. We got to stop bouncing back and forth between opinions, and we're either going to serve God with all our heart, or we're not going to serve him at all. So that's the story of Elijah, and I think that's the story that Jesus is trying to get across here too. You know, if you're thirsty, then come to me. If you need that water, if you need that Spirit in your life, then come to me, because it can't be found anywhere else. It can't be found anywhere else. You can't just go back and forth. You know, they really needed rain in Elijah's day, and what'd he say? If Baal can give you rain, then so be it. But if he can't, and Yahweh can give us rain, he'll show you by this offering. He showed them that God was God. No one can give us the rain except for Jesus. If you're thirsty, if you are living in a spiritual weary land, then the only thing that Jesus says is, come to me. If anyone's thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And whoever believes in me, as Scripture says, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. I believe that there is enough evidence to say that we are definitely living in spiritual times. We cannot, 2020 has been insane. And we got to forget about saying this is all coincidence, that Passover gets shut down, and now the Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Booths, a Day of Atonement, all that gets shut down. We can no longer say this is all just coincidence. God's doing something. We are living in prophetic times, and it's time, as Elijah would say, stop wavering back and forth. Either serve God with all your heart, or don't serve him at all. Serve whatever. And I think that's the time for us to make that choice. So thank you guys for watching tonight. I don't know how